All right, that's probably enough on Portland. That takes
Utah.
us to Utah. Go ahead.
So they have Chris Dunn's a free agent. They have early bird rights on him. Talon Horton Tucker and Kyra Lewis Jr. free agents. Kyra Lewis could technically be a restricted free agent. I don't think they're going to give him a qualifying offer. Their salary cap situation at a glance is, hey, we could just carve out $30+ million in cap space. And that's a lot of cap space to have. However, the biggest, I mean, like you look at the needs for this team. Like they need wing defense. I think they could probably use a veteran floor general, even if you believe that Keontae George is the guy. But it kind of comes back to their biggest question. We've seen reports that they'll go big game hunting. Is that one, accurate? And two, does that only happen via trade? Because I'm just assuming Larry Markkanen renegotiates and extends his contract. And if you're going to max him out, it eats up 24 plus million in your cap space. Do you expect, maybe that's the actual place to start. Do you expect them to renegotiate and extend him? And if so, is he getting the max?
Let's talk about that because we need to go down all the like potential pathways for Markkanen. So you can use your cap space to renegotiate and extend. You can let him go to free agency and sign him to a new deal. Then you can trade him. So like so they can get to, what's his max? Like 42.3. I'm just going off the top of my head. I think
that is it. That's the max start. And I think his contract, if you go the 4-year route for him, because he's been in the league for 7 years.
It's like 204, I want to say, is what you
for the four? Isn't that 189.5?
I don't know. This
good thing it would be kicking in immediately. So it's not like the Donovan Mitchell extension here.
No, right. I was just like, what is it? Because you could go to 42.3, then you extend off of that for 3 more, right?
Yeah. Right. So I'm assuming that the raise is, I would have it. I think it's 4 and 189.5. I'm pretty confident.
Okay. Let's go with that. Is there?
Oh no! Wait. Is that no? I think it's whatever. It's a lot of money, so it's around that. His situation's unique because, but also they could do a different thing where it's you're renegotiating and extending, and is his salary actually declining because he's not, like, in a vacuum, is he a max player? I guess he would get, if he was hitting the open market now, would Detroit or even Orlando, I'm just trying to think of teams that could easily get to max cap space. Would OKC would carve out the additional room to give him a max? Would Philly? I guess yes.
I think what would happen is we would be having conversations about like, hey, here's why it makes more sense to give Lauri Markkanen the full max than Paul George or whatever for like certain teams. I think it would at least be, if a team signed him to the full max, it would be like, yeah, I guess, I don't think it would raise a ton of eyebrows. So I think he might get the full max if he were on the market right now.
I'm also thinking now you're probably right about his extension is so that they would have it for 5 total years. It would 24 million in cap space to get up to the max this year. And then you could offer him the same extension that Donovan Mitchell is technically eligible for, which would be the 4 and 208.5. So you would all of a sudden have 5 years and $240+ million tied up in Lauri Markkanen, unless I'm misreading the renegotiate and extend rules there. Point being, I do expect him to be at the max salary next year, or at least like close to it. Like maybe he gives them a discount because they're giving him an immediate raise that they don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that. So you pencil him in, and then your cap space is vaporized.
Unless you're moving Colin Sexton and Clarkson to do that. Sexton's extension eligible too. This one I am super confident in. He's eligible for a 3-year extension at 86.1. I just don't think there's a need to extend him based off the direction of your team. So I wouldn't go that route. The real question here is, if you're going to renegotiate and extend, and we talked about this where we both said we wouldn't do it because we don't think the Jazz are going to make the requisite aggressive trades to maximize Markkanen at that pay grade. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to renegotiate and extend Larry Markkanen, I would like to see you actually not this be a red herring when it comes to being aggressive on the trade market. Go big game hunting.
Yeah, right. At that point. Right. No, I think that's right. And then it's, what does that look like? Because you're plenty of picks from the Gobert and Mitchell trades. So then it's just matching salary, which you can use John Collins, Clarkson, Sexton, that you're beyond max money right there. Then though, like you run into, we still got Keontae George, and we still got Walker Kessler, and we still got Taylor Hendricks. Like all those guys project to play a lot. So like does Markkanen and another max guy with 3 really young players, like, what are we doing? So, I mean, like, I'm not saying that makes it a good or bad decision to go big game hunting, like we keep saying, but like, it is a little like there's a little bit of ill fitting. I don't know. So it
Well,
doesn't
because it's
like
like,
it
who do
doesn't
you?
all square up.
Because you get into the situation, this isn't even a shot at Utah specifically, because Cleveland would go through the same thing. Is if let's just say they're willing to go big game hunting, you need to be in a situation where that player either wants to be there and will immediately resign with you, or there's enough time left on his deal, a la Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland, to where you think you've given yourself a shot to keep him beyond the 2 or 3 seasons that he's left under contract. And so when you're going to identify the names that could become available this year, I mean, some of them are just so polar opposite to your timeline that it doesn't make sense. Like if Joel Embiid became available, would you go after him? I guess maybe him and Markkanen would be quite a duo. So
Yeah, I
bad
guess.
example, but like but again, that's someone who, when you look at what's left on his deal, it's okay. He better be willing to sign an extension here or just resign when he gets to free agency. And so identifying those types of players where like they're not going to be a team that gets involved in, oh, Paul George opted in, we're going to trade for him. Jimmy Butler's available. They're not going to be that type of big game hunter, but like they're a team that could create their own trade market. We mentioned Mikal Bridges and Larry Markkanen as these trade targets for teams with all these assets. What if they're just on the same team and Utah trades for Mikal Bridges? Like, does that name do it for you? Or is it, oh, okay, Mikal Bridges, Larry Markkanen? I'm assuming, I bet you Mikal Bridges, if you put Walker Kessler on the table, like that's the one that maybe gets Brooklyn to think. So okay, so Taylor Hendricks and Keandre George, and like where does that actually leave you?
It's the same issue. It's a weird, like, I'm almost, as we're just spitballing here, but I'm almost more inclined to go, and the salary gets weird because you're acquiring guys that are cheaper. Like, I don't know if the Rockets are going to choose between extensions for Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. Like, what if you went and tried to get Jalen Green? Like, I don't know what you got to give Houston to make that make sense, but I'm almost more inclined to find someone that's like, I mean, Bridges kind of fits the bill a little bit, but he's pretty close to Markkanen's age. That's like makes sense between Markkanen and your like ridiculously young other core guys. So like maybe that's someone that the second you get him, here comes the rookie scale extension. It's going to be a lot, and like that's your version of big game hunting,
or someone who's still on that rookie scale extension, maybe. So like a Jaden McDaniels, just about to start it.
Yeah. Or like I'm trying to think other guys in the class that haven't like or are not locks to get extensions with their teams, like a Kuminga in Golden State, or like Franz Wagner, or like none of these guys are necessarily available, but like someone in that from that draft, I guess, basically, or that is approaching extension eligibility or is going to hit extension eligibility, and their teams aren't like Wagner's a bad example in that regard because he's going to get it, but that I don't know, because I just have a hard time with the weird, like, okay, we got Markkanen back. He's like in the middle of his prime. And then we got all these guys that are like 3-4 years away from mattering.
Well, I guess what the benefit is do they not need, where we look at it when we talk about Golden State, whereas what's the best player that would immediately elevate them to title contention if they made a trade? But because in Utah, in theory, okay, matching salary needs to go out. But when you're looking at their actual young guys, in theory, you don't need to trade any of those dudes necessarily because you have all these picks. And so can we get a player who's not a top 10, top 15 player, but because we have this internal growth possibility along with this player coming in under contract, could you shoot lower? Like, it feels like the player probably needs to be better. I would still do it, but the player needs to be better than Mikal Bridges. I would still trade for him if the opportunity presented itself, unless if Mikal was younger, it'd be a no-brainer. For like, if it was Jaden McDaniels, so I don't think he has the same level of self-creation that Mikal Bridges does, but that's somebody you can look at. Okay, maybe you overpaid to get him, but because you didn't have to give up any of your core players, and he's on that first max, or not max, but you know what I mean, the first rookie scale extension. You're right. I didn't think there was the level of awkwardness there. I didn't process it as much until hearing you talk about it.
And like, you don't want to necessarily again, this is like counseling a team to like not draft for need. If you're a bad team, you just take the best player. It's like, Darius Garland might become available for reasons we've discussed on previous editions. Like, but then you're just bringing him in over the top of Keontae George. Like, what's because he fits more neatly into the newly created Markkanen age band. but like this again, this is maybe why you just trade Markkanen. Like it just because to sort this whole mess out. Like
well, I
get
think
all the way into the rebuild.
we're in Bulls territory where the Jazz actually have a future. So I'm not using the Bulls as this identical analog, but we know that the Jazz aren't going to do that at this point. I think it's more likely that the Jazz trade Markkanen and the Bulls tear it down, but like they've kind of portrayed this as Markkanen he's at least going to be here through next season. Like maybe they look to trade him on his extension, but so we have to operate with that and say, okay, well now what do you do from here? If that's just what they're doing, you do need to figure out this sort of awkwardness. Right. And I'm wondering, would there be value to you? What if you made a series of moves for like these B level where it's what if you got DeJounte Murray, who kind of comes in over the top of George, but doesn't. You could play the two together. And he just doesn't make enough money to where it's, we have to commit to him over George right now. And then you went and you got Mikal Bridges. It's like because you could make those two moves where it's DeJounte Murray and then a wing type deal. Like, does that where it's okay, there's no caps lock superstar, but we're leaving open the possibility one of our younger guys hits. And then maybe we just come over the top. Maybe we overwhelm you with the quality of our depth.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about Murray. I do like that as like a really clean fit if you're trying to make sure not to just hamstring Keontae George's development. I wonder though, like, okay, let's say you do that. Let's say the Jazz trade what it takes, probably in the form of like a lot of draft equity, to get a core of Markkanen's extended, Bridges, DeJounte Murray. Like that's an exciting team. I think we're both like pretty interested in that. But now, like, how good is that team? And now you've also given up theoretically a lot of your surplus of draft equity to get those guys. And then suddenly are you just like a 46 to 51 win team that doesn't have a lot of outs anymore? Like now maybe depending on the fan base, like awesome, we'll take it. You know, like that might be a good place to be. Weirdly, this is for a team with as much flexibility as the Jazz have. It's like, there's no simple answer. I don't feel like for what the way forward is.
Well, I guess, so we're framing it as they need to do stuff this offseason. And part of that is because if you're going to operate the way they seem like they're operating is we're presuming that their own picks are never going to be at a high enough level to draft the next player who's the best player on the contending version of the Jazz. Is there an element of, okay, that's fine, but if we're going to have Larry Markkanen under contract and all these dudes are still on their rookie scales, we have all these picks, we just wait and we go through another season like this one. And then if Jaylen Brown shakes loose as Boston gets these or the player that actually makes sense pops up and we go get them. But I will say, I feel like we're not considering that scenario enough and there's merit to it. But this I'm pretty sure fans don't want it, but like if Trae Young became available, I do think the Jazz might just be mentioned in the same breath, because if they're looking for big game hunting, he's someone where it's all right. He came in over the top of Keontae George, but that makes sense that he did. You might not love how ball dominant he is, the defensive issues, the stuff that's going on behind the scene. I mean, John Collins is there, so they're clearly not going after
not for long.
But like, if anyone who could make an All NBA team in a given season becomes available, and like I'll say it this way: if anyone who can make a second team All NBA in a given season, not that they're perennial second team All NBA, but like Trae Young could feasibly do that, they will be mentioned because that's the kind of level of move that you need if you want to become a contender without building through the draft. And just free agency, you're never going to get these guys at that level anymore.
As we're getting, or maybe I don't want to speak for you, as I'm getting like tied up in knots now about like, well, what does make the most sense? Is the question we should be asking maybe like, is Markkanen good enough for us to be making all of our long-term roster building decisions around him? Like he's clearly your best player now, but is he at the level where you start thinking like, oh, we got to orient a timeline around this guy or all this? Like, I think the answer is probably no, right?
No, you would have to believe that player is in your program already. And I guess feasibly, if you think Walker Kessler for some reason, although they didn't telegraph that this past season with him, if you think he's the next generational Rudy Gobert, or if you I think even more so, you need it to be, we think Taylor Hendricks is Jaren Jackson Jr., but he can create his own looks at a higher rate. Or we think Keontae George is going to be a top 10 player in this league. You have to believe that guy's already, I don't think, and I love Taylor Hendricks, I don't think that level of players in there, which leads me to believe that they're either sitting and waiting, like it's just, oh, we're extending Markkanen and we're just going to sit and wait, or that they fully believe that Markkanen is going to be more valuable as a trade asset on his next deal than if he's an $18 million expiring contract.
Yeah, I think, and there's the whole thing of like, it's Danny Ainge. He's going to just make sure we've got the guy that you want, and we'll keep him until you get desperate enough to do something stupid. And then we will trade him, and we'll hang out until that happens. Cause that's how you build like a real big time winner, is you take advantage of someone that finally gives in and trades something to you that they probably shouldn't for a player like Markkanen. Maybe like everything we've talked about has to be viewed like with that kind of hanging over everything.
Yeah, this team was surprisingly tough, but they're fascinating in a good way because they have so many avenues to explore.
Yeah, which we did at length.
Well, I'm fully twisted into a pretzel at the moment. Right, I know. I didn't think I was going to end the podcast like this.
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to have such a hard time with what's the correct decision for the Jazz, but here we are.